Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome to the Women in Science discussion panel. Our idea behind this event is to inspire women and men around us to continue their scientific careers and to improve their confidence, to help them deal with problems and dilemmas they might have, and to let them know that they are not alone. The panelists that kindly accept to participate are role models that can inspire the next generation of scientists present here today. It was hard to choose the panelists because many attendees here are role models already. So please, all the attendees, feel free to answer any question that the people in the audience ask. Let's start by introducing our panelists. First is Dr. Andrea Cuentas. I will say it in the order that I have. I was looking at Andrea and then I started. Andrea Cuentas she's a postdoc in Yale University of Medicine. Judith Yanowitz she's a full professor in the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. Carolyn Phillips, she's an associate professor in the University of Southern California. Andrea Calixto, she's a full professor in the Universidad de Valparaíso. Monica Colaiacovo, full professor in Harvard Medical School. Chiayu, associate professor in Universidad de Valparaíso, who is visiting the LAWM community. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation. And I have introduced, and Dr. Javier Apfeld, who's coming from the associate professor from the Northeastern University, sorry. So I will ask first the panelists to introduce themselves starting from Calixto, from Andrea Calixto to the right, a brief introduction of their careers so you can learn a little bit more than what you found when you Google them, and to learn some details about their careers or their paths. And after that, we'll start with questions. Please, Andrea.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Rosa. Pleasure to be here. I was raised in Cuba, so I studied microbiology at the University of Havana, and I later did my PhD at Columbia University in New York with Marty Chaffee. After that, I decided to do a solo postdoc in Santiago, so I came back to Chile, and now I am a professor at the University of Valparaíso, which we are very pleased to host you here. You might understand why this is my dream job already.
Hi, I'm Javier Apfeld. I grew up in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and I came to the US for college. I actually went to 4 universities. I started at University of Buenos Aires, then I transferred to Worcester State College, and transferred to UMass Amherst, and then transferred to MIT. I mean, it wasn't like that you knew that things were going to work at the time. And I think maybe this is going to be one of the messages that comes from the round table. Then I did my PhD at UCSF and with Cynthia Kenyon studying worms. And then I did a tiny postdoc with Paul Sternberg, but then I went to biotech for many years. And then I worked with a dietitian for 10 years, and then I started my lab at Northeastern. Yep.
Wow, what a ride.
So I'm Monica Colaiacovo. I grew up briefly in Argentina and mostly in Brazil. So I was there all the way through completion of college. And then I went to the US for grad school. I actually went to Brandeis University, from where Piali Sangupta, that was the keynote speaker, where she's a faculty at. And then from there, and I was working on budding yeast. There I moved to Stanford, where I did my postdoc, and that's when I started working on C. elegans. And then from there, I moved back to Boston to start my lab at Harvard, where we've been using C. elegans for a while. But I guess, as you can tell from the panelists, very different paths and leaving places in Latin America at different stages of education, et cetera.
Okay. So I'm Carolyn Phillips. I grew up in San Diego, California, and have lived most of my life in California. I did my undergraduate at UC Davis. Then I moved to UC Berkeley, where I was a graduate student, and I got my PhD with Abby Dernberg, actually studying meiosis, similar to Monica and Judy. And then I moved to Boston to do my postdoc with Gary Ruvkin at Harvard Medical School. And then finally, I got to move back to California, where I now am an associate professor at the University of Southern California. And I've been there about 8 years. And I think that's it.
Hi, Judith Yanowitz. Sometimes I'll introduce myself as Judy. I'm American through and through. And at the mentoring lunch yesterday, it came up that science found me. I didn't find science. So I majored in biology, but didn't know I was going to go into science as an undergrad. And I sort of fell into a tech position at Rockefeller University, fell in love with chromosomes, and that was it. I was stuck for life. And so I now have my lab. So I did graduate work and then a postdoc at the Carnegie Institution in Baltimore, but then I had an independent position there called a staff associate position for 6 years before moving to the University of Pittsburgh. And so sometimes the straight path isn't straight, and it's okay to go off, right? I think Javier, represents that probably better than me. But I also want to say I've been collaborating with Danny Hochbaum for the last, 7 years. And I had the pleasure of coming to the meeting 3 years ago as my first trip to South America. And so you guys might be stuck with me, but the advantage of that is I also have had now two Argentinians, a Venezuelan, a Uruguayan, someone's from Spain. And so the dominant language of my lab is actually Spanish. And we have joint lab meetings with someone who's Mexican and has several other Spanish speakers. So I am learning Spanish.
Hola, hi everyone. My name is Andrea Cuentas-Condori. I did my college degree, my bachelor's in biology in Lima, Peru, Cayetano. And then I had the opportunity to do an internship through a program called Research Experience for Peruvian Undergrads. And that internship, I think, changed my life. It gave me the opportunity to do an 8-week program at Vanderbilt University under the mentoring of Andrea McCall, working with Rosa at the time. I had never worked on cellular molecular biology. In Lima, I worked with immunology and malaria. I mean, infectious disease is one of the main areas where funding is, there is at least some funding available. And that 8-week internship gave me the opportunity to then have a strong letter of recommendation and then being accepted to a PhD program there at Vanderbilt, where I had the chance and the pleasure to work with David Miller as my mentor for my PhD. I had never worked with worms. I had never worked with neuroscience. I thought I was going to do cancer genetics. But then neuroscience found me. It was just fascinating. And now I'm stuck in the neuroscience, the elegance community. It was really hard when I was studying to do a postdoc. Everybody tells you you have to diversify your set of techniques or like knowledge. But I really like this community a lot. So I stuck to my gut. I proposed a project. Daniel Colon Ramos liked it. We submitted a couple grants. It was well received. And I'm happy to talk more about that. So yeah.
Hi, my name is Chiayu. I was born in Taiwan and I moved to the States, United States, when I was 8. And I grew up in New York, went to New York University, had my bachelor's there. I was always interested, so I'm not a worm person. Andrea would like to introduce me, so you're not a worm person in the meeting. But I have started, we call mentor Scarlett. So I do learn. I know the head and the tail now, right?
That's so weird.
So
Male and hermaphrodites or just the hermaphrodite?
just the hermaphrodite. They're the bigger ones, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. So, but I was always interested, like for me, it's cognition. And in NYU, actually, I was divided between going to psychology and neuroscience. But then I decided that I like cellular stuff more, so I went with neuroscience. And so my bachelor's is in neuroscience, my PhD is in neuroscience, and neuroscience all the way through. And for my PhD, I worked with many different animals. I recorded in vivo activity in the cortex of ferrets. So I was trying to understand like changes in cortical activity. And then I did 2 postdocs, one in Einstein in Bronx, New York, where I learned to do brain slice recording. So that's basically what I do. I record neurons and image their activity in mammalian. So I use mice and rats now. And then I did the second postdoc at Yale University, learning to do 2-photon microscopy. And then after that, I started group leader position here. That's where I met Andrea at the University of Valparaiso. I guess I'm currently still a group leader. And I guess, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's start with the questions. Judith, woman in science, why does it still matter?
Well, thank you for that question. So I think there's 2 important answers to that question. So why does it matter? So the first is that women have made great strides over the past 50 years. And the fight isn't over. I think white women in the United States are doing pretty well. I think Americans in the United States are doing less well. And probably many here in Latin America are doing less well as well. So, and our Black women are doing even less well. And so our underrepresented women and men, our non-binary colleagues are not doing so well. And I think we can learn a lot from the fights that women have had and help represent all underrepresented groups. I think the other thing is that even though many women are entering science, many of them are leaving. And that's because we still really haven't reached the upper echelons, at least percentage-wise. And so I think that there's still much room that we can have to get into leadership roles in science.
Right, thank you very much. So now we have prepared many questions, but we also would like to hear from you. So, and we would like to open the discussion just not only to women, but also to underrepresented scientists here in the audience as well. So I don't know if in this point you have a question that you would like to ask. Not yet? Okay. So let's continue, and whenever you feel ready to ask a question, you can raise your hand. So Caroline, let's go to something that I think most of the people would like to know. How do you balance your work with family?
I mean, I think that's something that's going to differ, I think, depending on what stage of your career you're in. So now I'm now an associate professor, and I have a 1.5-year-old. And so, you know, that's definitely been probably one of the biggest challenges in my career thus far, is figuring out how to take care of a small child while also, you know, sort of, you know, working full time. And, you know, I think the first thing is just having a good support system, having, whether that's friends, family, daycare, you know, anything that you can rely on to take some of the burden off. And so that you have like that mental energy to put into your science, because, you know, you can't be watching a small child and also like thinking deeply and reading and doing all those things. And so I think really sort of figuring out how to have someone help you and you know, getting that time that you need, well, whether that's at work or at home, where you can, you know, when the baby's napping, you know, where you can sit down and read a paper and really think deeply about what you're doing, I think is the most important thing.
Thank you. Monique, yes. Go ahead. please.
I'd like to ask that question to the men in the room because this question is also asked to women. Men doesn't have family. Do they have to balance their life also? They have to understand that the family is mainly of us. So this question has to be to the men also.
Sure, Javier. You were the brave, would you?
Yes, sorry, I
You
am
know
not
that.
the rights, but the men behind me also.
This is really good. So my wife is also a professional. She's a pediatric oncologist. We both have careers, and we buy everything, and we have a joint Google Calendar, and it kind of rules our life with who's picking up. We have two children, Pablo and Julio, and they're now 12 and 10. We now also have a dog, and that makes things a little harder. We're still trying to figure out. It's good, the logistics. I mean, we love the dog. And yeah, I mean, I think we when the kids were younger, we had a babysitter that would come help us pick up the kids from school between 5 and 7:30 until we come home and just interface, and so that those 2 hours that she covered 4 days a week were give us some oxygen. Not necessarily use it every day, but just to have the flexibility was really helpful. But I don't know, I learned how to program MATLAB when probably we had pre-me, and so the second, and so there were lots of long nights that we were just watching the baby, and where I had my computer and learned to code. It's hard to. I mean, we're still trying to figure out about it. It's not easy, you know. I think each person and each family they do it. They have to figure out, you know, what support network they have, and try to reach out for help. Have friends. We have, you know, but it's not. It's an open problem, right? I mean, it's not. There's not a simple answer. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I don't have the male perspective, you know, personally, but I would say, so when I had my kids, I was living in the Bronx and commuting to Yale and New Haven. So it's about an hour and a half each way. And so my husband actually is the one that drops the kids off at daycare when they were little, picks them up. He's the one that makes their breakfast, lunch, dinner, you know, and I was the one commuting and working. So, he says this a lot, like we are a team. That's what he says, right? And so at least for me, it's like the things I do is because of the two of us, right? Like he took some of the responsibilities and I do my thing. So I know for him, it's not like having a family is a woman's job, right? Like he really did, like it was a family. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean with the question that why women has to explain how to do it? Why we don't ask to man? I know that Javier or the husband of her is working on that, but the question, I mean the question, why do we have to explain how we do it? That's the idea.
So I just want to quickly address that, which is I think that it has traditionally been the woman's role to raise the children, and our policies are not geared towards families, right? And that's what we need to change. We need to change the language and the approach. And in doing so, we also have to recognize that there are people who are not choosing not to have families, and they still deserve to have some of the schedules changed around the things that they're doing in their lives to support what they have chosen to be involved in, or their aging parents, or whatever it is. And so that we need to sort of change the culture around focus.
Any more? Another question? Yes.
Hi. Yeah. Well, I was wondering if anyone in the panel or in the public has thought to change their plans of working in science because you feel less prepared, or you feel that, I don't know, some personal issues because of the family thing, or the old parents growing old and you have to take care of them, or something like that. Because in Mexico, and I think in most, well, I don't know if in most parts, but women have to take care of the family, the children, and also of the parents. So I know a couple of stories of friends of mine, women, that have had to change their direction on science to take care of their families. But also, I was wondering if any of you have a story of feeling less than a man, or being bullied, or something like that, that maybe not directly, but the community made you feel less important, and you feel like, okay, maybe I don't belong here. So what society has made us feel sometimes. I don't know if I explained myself. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank
you did.
I mean, I can answer maybe the latter part of the question. I think I can speak for myself, but I know my experience is not unique. But I've been in rooms or meetings where I've said something, and then 5 minutes later, a man in the group will say exactly the same thing, and everybody goes, yes, right? And you're thinking, it's exactly what I just said 5 minutes ago. And then you don't want to sound a little bit too bitter when you're trying to make a point, right? It happens. It happens all the time. It gets better. I guess also as you proceed in your career, it gets easier and better. It doesn't mean that it won't happen. What I decided to do is not just acquiesce and stay silent when something like that happens, and I very politely or kindly will make a comment. The other thing I found is that it's important to get support from other women or other people in the group that you think will be supportive. And so what I do when someone else says something, regardless of, who they are, etc., I'll be like, that's a wonderful idea, and I'll elevate that idea. And I think if more people in the room start to do that, then eventually it feeds forward to you. When you speak up, your ideas will be better respected and recognized. So I think that's the mentality that's important to have in any situation, in any board meeting, anything, committees, everything.
So, for example, because your question, sorry, because your question has many parts. I think can be breaking in 3 parts, and one of it was if you didn't feel like you belong there, right? You mean that? Did you mean that? That if you feel you're not capable of doing the job that you are doing? Mhm. Yes, there's also now something called the imposter. How do you say?
Yeah, something like the
The
imposter.
imposter. That it's a feeling that I didn't know it had a name because I had it all the time. So
But-
I'm not good enough to do this. I'm not good enough to do that. And it's something that it has to grow your confidence that you are actually doing it and you are capable of doing it. So there are now many courses or books that we can read about it and learn a little bit more about that. And just
Yeah, my
Sure.
question was a little bit like, if the imposter syndrome is, do you feel it's more on us, on women?
I don't know. I don't know if men ever feel.
I think so. I clearly remember this game changer event in my life that liberated me a little bit from that imposter syndrome feeling. And the reason why or I used to feel, oh, I'm being an imposter here, because I was scared of failing. Because, I mean, nobody wants to go through a failure process, but I had to learn that failure and success go together, side by side. They are not opposites. They are go together. And so in my case, I've been working on being less afraid of failing. And that has helped me liberate and show myself for who I truly am. Like, and so I think if we can strengthen that muscle, all of us in the audience, because I think, I mean, males can also, or men can also feel this way. But somehow, since we're little, I mean, we tend to praise, oh, you are so brave, while to women we say, oh, your dress is so pretty. And so if we can start changing that narrative, I think, since with the children in your life, you're already making a big change, I think, society-wise. We're gonna see it in the next generations. But just be less afraid of failing. It's part of the process, and it's fine. If you failed, it's because you tried, and that's okay.
Great answer. So let's have a question here or a comment from Chiayu. Volume. The closer, maybe you need your microphone closer. Yeah, now it's
So
on.
I come from a department that's 50% women, and a lot of us, a lot of very senior women. And one of the reasons for the success of the department has been, as the women have gotten more senior, we've all made a conscious decision to do the kinds of things that Monica was just saying, which is not just call out, let's just say, bad behavior, and that's not just restricted to men, anybody, but to also very actively support women in every possible way, because there's one thing about getting women into the field, the other thing is keeping them once they're there. And I think that's one of the things you were talking about. And there are lots of things you can do that our department has done, which is why we've been extremely successful. It's very unusual anywhere to have a department that's 50% women. And this is something that I think as all of you move up, will get more senior in the field, you have to sort of work on building this community, supporting, making sure that you're always there to support your colleagues in every possible way and giving women a voice in every decision that the department makes or that your program makes.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm working in the mechanical engineering department. So apart from the fact that 70% of faculty there and students are identify as men, there's just 3 people there who do biology research. So that's cool, a cool minority. So there are ongoing efforts in order to encourage women to participate, come to the department and stay in the department. That's super important. And that includes students, postdocs, and faculty. I'd like to respond to the imposter syndrome and also to the failure thing. The imposter syndrome, which I'm experiencing half of the time, I used to experience it all of the time, so that's progress, has also to do with comparison. We tend to compare people with one another, and I guess that comes naturally in academia. It's a very competitive field. But then when it comes to women, we tend to compare them to their male counterparts, and sometimes we tend to expect more because they are expected to perform better just in order to prove that they are equally good at what they're doing. And then if they become too good, they might be called names, like with negative connotation, because they are too strict, they are too good, they are too competitive. That's also an issue. So I just invite everyone just to expect what they expect from everyone and not make that discrimination. And then something that helps students, in my experience, is to, all students of all genders, is to let them know that we have been failing. Everybody has been failing, and even big names have been failing. And this has to do with this publishing habit. We only publish the successful outcome of a story, but we don't allow people to know how many times we had this experiment, we had to run this experiment in order to get a good control, for example, or how many times we had to run the experiment in order to get a good p-value. So we have to let people know how often we fail and how big we fail in order to reach some success. That will encourage people, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? So yes, please, Julian.
So following on this imposter syndrome, I think this is something that we can all contribute, like making public that we are doing bad. And I think this is a key point. And also there is a cultural difference probably from the US, Latin America. So in the US, everybody's doing great. So how are you doing? I'm doing great. So everything is fine. So at least in Spain, you are asking that in the corridor. And how are you doing? Oh man, I'm so tired. I screw you or whatever. So I mean, it's true. It looks stupid, but that made me feel good when I see that other people is kind of doing bad as I'm doing, right? Because sometimes if you are listening all the time that everybody is doing great, you are feeling the imposter, right? So I think we should be more open. So, I mean, I make a tweet like a couple of weeks saying that I didn't get a grant. I had to keep fighting. People normally don't do that. They say when they get the grant. And I think we should be open on this. I think it will be easier for everyone because the reality is that this career is tough.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you. There is this big, document that I go to all the time. It's called the CV of failures. I think a professor at Princeton put together a CV of all the appointments and grants that he applied for and he didn't get. And that was so liberating to see that was part. Yeah, that's just life. And so I think seeing that, being conscious about failing is part of the process, again, helped me a lot. And when I sometimes mentor students in my laboratory, and the first time they do experiment and it doesn't work, it's like, hey, this is just a test run. This is part of the process. We're doing something nobody else has done before. And I think if you continue just showing the reality of life, I think it will just benefit us all. So yeah, let's continue doing that.
Thank you. Yes.
I just wanted to ask you girls if you have any word of advice of how to survive these 2 years or 3 years of pandemic for the females that have to stay at home. I mean, because for example, in my case, okay, it was the 1 year the university were closed, and the next year the school were closed. So in my case, I lost 2 years of productivity. So for me, it's really now really hard to compete with other males that did that could go to the lab and stay productive a lot of these years, but I have this 2-3 year gap of publication. So how can, and probably this is a problem that many other females from Latin America, especially Latin America, had to deal, right? Taking care of the family, sick family members. So do you have any word of advice on how to survive at your scientific career when you have that 2-3 year gap of publication?
Well, I heard someone said that we were in the same, with the pandemics, we were in the same storm, but we were not in the same ship. So some people were on tires trying to survive, and other cruisers, so it was so true. And I think the pandemic affected all of us. So we all have to stop, and you don't have to feel bad about it. I mean, it also affects me, and I guess many of you in the audience, and we will recover. So it doesn't matter that we think we are going up. And I think what I would like to say is that it's okay to not be productive for a little while, because you have to take care of your baby, because your mother is sick, because you have to deal with something in your life, because you have a personal crisis. It's okay to stop for a while, and then take care of yourself, and then go back and do your work. So the academia doesn't have to be like this. It can go like the lifespan, right? Like this. And sometimes it crashes, but then you get up. So, yeah.
One thing that I've seen Maureen Barr do that she does it really well, in her CV, she puts like I don't know under which category, but I remember she was an invited speaker at Vanderbilt once, and so they shared her CV by a sketch with us, and she has listed the years she has had a kid. And because that's life, I mean, and so in that way, she, I think, is being very open and transparent on what was going on at the moment in her life. I don't know if this is gonna, be the way to fix that 2-3 year gap when other, members in the community didn't have to face or face the same slowdown. But I think opening up about it might be one way. I don't know if there is a solution, but yeah.
Yes, yes,
I
Andrea.
think one thing that's important is that you have to have people in leadership positions that will push for a recalibration. So whether it's at the level of promotion or hiring or funding agencies, you need people, or you need to connect to people that can push, so that now a committee will be told, remember, there were 2 to 3 years, maybe women were more affected disproportionately than men because of X, Y, or Z conditions or characteristics. And so consider that when you're making decisions. Maybe the record of publication suffered a lull. So again, you have to have people or connections or advocates that will make sure that it recalibrates people's expectations. Because I understand where you're coming from, right? There was a lull. And so it's important, and this is why we're here, so that people who can then go back to their institutions and who are in a position of perhaps suggesting something like this when they're evaluating promotions and so on, that they'll reconsider the fact that there was a period of time that was very complicated for a lot of people.
Thank you, Monica. Andrea?
What I was gonna say is that specifically to Paloma and people that live in Chile, is that this is also a political issue that is extremely important. So I have had the chance to talk to politicians lately because I am a leader in my institution. And I realized that it all goes through them unless they make changes that are applied to, for example, the grants that we can apply to, that are specific rules that benefit or that make justice, as you say, that balance this inherent injustice in the fact that people devote their time. This has to be ruled, written, and really followed through. So what we are doing here is that the Ministry of Science have understood that that we need laws to protect women. So women now have, for example, if you've had a kid, you have more time to, for example, give the report on your grant. You have more time to say, I have, for example, people that don't have kids have a 5-year time to say, these are my papers. If you had a child, you have 6 or 7 years to report what you've done. So there are ways to compensate for this, but there are local problems where, for example, having women in leadership that really care about these things is extremely important, because in the end, it comes down to making a point in a committee and saying, stop this, you guys, you're not considering this, so we are going to address this issue. And I think that we just have to be extremely brave, because our colleagues most of the time are not in our shoes. They don't understand at all what we are talking about, or they just don't feel empathic. And so I just encourage everybody to do this work as much as they can. And we are, what I can tell Paloma and the other women in this group that are in this country is that we are working really hard for that, but it starts from our leadership at the top, like having, for example, a Minister of Science who is a woman. The Vice Minister of Science is a woman. And last time we had the local representative of the ministry here, as it's a woman. And these are the people we have to look for when we need to do something. Like Monica said, you need to know your connection, that it's not gonna come to you. So these things have to be done almost by hand, like this, day by day. And I have to say, for example, in my institution, it's heavily male-dominated places, neuroscience. So the example that Piali gave, it's extremely exceptional what happens in her department. We are 3 women in an ocean of men, like probably most of you experience. And what has happened is that they have had to listen to us. They wanted it or not, they have, because this has become an issue of the country. It becomes a law, it becomes a rule that women have to be represented. Right now, if you are applying, for example, to associate grants, you have to have a male and a female. Otherwise, you cannot apply or your points are dropping. So these are concrete things that that are being done. Otherwise, it's not out of goodwill. Goodwill, it's gonna take millions of years. So you have to push it. I don't know if I helped you, but seriously, this is much better than probably 10 years ago when we were really in the Stone Age around here.
Those are really good qualities that is undertaken here. So in every university or in Latin America, we are building this a little bit. And do you have any other question that you would like to ask? So I have a question for men. How do you feel in this world where women are taking more power? Anyone in the audience? Do you feel intimidated? Are you happy to? I know that the younger generations are doing a lot. Yes, Julian, please.
Yeah, thank you. No, I definitely don't feel intimidated. I think it's all the opposite. I think this panel and many others are so important because the fight of the women to have equal rights is changing, and we're in a much better situation now. Like especially like we see PhD students are 50-50. Of course, higher CEOs and chairs and department we need more women. But the things are changing. But that's not my point. My point is that the fight for women for equality is impacting all of us. For example, me as a minority underrepresented scientist, as a LGBT community, non-binary, whatever, the fight of the woman that you are teaching us is that if you did it, we can also do it. Everyone can do it. So your fight and these kind of panels impacts everyone, all the minorities, because the fight for women's rights is a fight for everyone. And I want to say thank you for this panel and all the effort of the women, because they are affecting to make a better world, basically. And definitely, I don't feel intimidated. I'm very happy that we have a lot of women in science, a lot of PhD students, master student, whatever. That's what that would be my comment. That is not only for women. Maybe the women are hopefully at the end of the fight for equality to reach the same level as men, but there are many other underrepresented minority groups that will benefit from your effort. That would be my comment.
Thank you. Certainly, the younger scientists like Julian have a different view of everything, and they support everything. So I'm the head of the department in my institution, and Julian is in the same department. And once we were having a meeting, and someone really senior in our department say a really bad comment about women, and I just froze, and I couldn't say anything, but Julian, fight for it. Thank you.
And I think my advice would be, you don't have to be very vocal or aggressive. You can just make, as you were saying, just a polite comment like, oh, that's really not necessary.
I couldn't say that. I don't want to do that.
Some people will react.
Very calm.
So on that topic, I just want to say one quick comment. So I work at McGee Women's Research Institute, and it's one of the largest institutions in the United States devoted exclusively to women's health. And my boss is a male, and he often gets the question, so why is it an institute focused on women's health, right? That seems to be leaving out half the population. And he said, every person on this planet is born from a woman. Women's health is important for everybody's health, and we know disproportionately that the health of women is responsible for the health of their children and their families. And so I think having that lens of thank you for promoting women is trying to also promote other underrepresented minorities, and the fight is the same. So thanks.
You have another question? So I have a question for the panelists. What kind of advice would you give to a woman that is experiencing discrimination in her current position? Like right now, maybe they are in the audience and they are experiencing something. What kind of advice would you give them? What action to take?
I think because of, I mean, it echoes a little bit with what Andrea said, like you have to go and get it, or you have to know who you talk to. I think we haven't addressed yet the importance of having good mentors and identifying who a good mentor and what are the characteristics of somebody who is a good mentor. And it really, like if somebody is feeling in distress in the situation they are right now, identify who are those mentors that you can go to within your department, because there exist people who will have your back. And a mentor is not only somebody who works with you 24/7, or like somebody you talk to almost every week. You can have also informal mentors, but you have to make the connection. I still, in my second year of PhD, Vanderbilt had the brilliant idea of hiring the first Latin American woman in my department, Vivian Gama. She's from Colombia, and just having her being part of it gave me so much hope. Like, oh, there is a way for me to also be part of this. And Vivian and I have always exchanged so many conversations over coffee, but not only about like, oh, my experiment is not working or working this way, but just checking in, like, how are you doing? Like, what is going on in the department? Why did I do this? Who do we go and talk to? So identify who these people are for you, and establish a relationship with them, and hopefully they're going to be able to listen and to act for and advocate for what you need this time.
Thank you. Yes.
So something that it's very ad hoc is that the LAWM community has a mentor-mentee program. So I was going to talk about that later in this meeting, but I'll just say now that we have the privilege to be in this community where there is this program, and this year Latin America participated like never before. So both mentors from Latin America and mentees have joined this program, because also mentorship doesn't necessarily have to be in your institution. You can identify people you want to talk to outside your institution at all stages of your career. This was designed originally for early career scientists like postdocs and assistant professors, but right now also people that are in the whatever stage of their career can find mentors. I personally have a mentor because I really need it. So I asked Mira, who is the director of this program, I'm co-chairing with her, to please incorporate this, because sometimes I feel suffocated and I want to talk to somebody that can give me advice, somebody that really knows what I'm going through. So maybe I am a leader, but I don't know how to be a leader, and I have problems with older leaders or male leaders, and this is happening all the time. And so we have this program for extended to students that also have peer groups. So the program developed a peer group for students, for postdocs, etc. And I really encourage you to participate. This is something completely concrete that many of you are already in this program. Many of the ones sitting here are mentors, and over there too. And I want to thank also the Latin American PIs that joined this year, because this gives an amazing possibility to our community and to our women and men and everybody to really find help within their institution or outside. So a Zoom connection takes no time, just find your people. Yep.
Thank you. Any more questions? We have 5 minutes left, so be brave and ask that question that you got is asking to do it. No? Yes. Yes, Maria. You can do it in Spanish if you want, and you
Let
can
me see
translate.
If I am brave enough. But the thing that I was going to ask if anybody here has a situation, an example of situation that didn't pass with them necessarily, but that passes for with violence, like abuse. It could be verbal, it could be sexual. I think it's important to talk about that because if there is someone that is passing through this is really important to get oriented about what to do. Of course, women can do this abuse as well, but we know as women that this is much more common with us, right? So that's it. I thought it would be a good moment to protect someone that would be in danger. I don't know. What should be done? Who to talk about? This kind of things. I think it's important. Right? It's a sensible theme, but I think we need to talk about it.
So I'll just take a quick stab at that. At least in the US, most institutions have a position that's called an ombudsman. I don't know what that translates to in Spanish. I apologize. But it's an official of the institution whose job is to hear complaints in a private way, but they do, because of the position, have an obligation to act upon that, right? So some people don't want to come forward because they're concerned that then they're going to have to accuse their boss of something ultimately. But at least it's a person to go to, and they sort of tell you what sort of the lay of the land is. Some departments are starting to do training to have faculty choose to be not defined ombudsmen, but sort of, the ear to listen to these complaints. I don't have an exact word for it, but where you would come in if you had a problem, you would know that there was these 3 different faculty in your department who would be there to listen and advise you on maybe direct you to psychiatric help, to, if you need medical help, if you just want to talk about it, in terms of, and then legal help if needed, right? To just at least direct you, and they know there's resources. And I thought that model was actually really potentially appealing because it's something that we all can bring to our institutions, is asking our departments to set this up and not have it be a single person, right? You want multiple people because and at different levels, because different people are going to feel more or less comfortable talking to different people.
That's really nice. I don't think all the institutions here in Latin America have this possibility, but it should be implemented as soon as possible because it's very important to count on this. Thank you, Judith.
Yes, in our university in UNAM, we have they are training or giving courses to some people that you can go and tell your problem, and they will tell you what to do. And also you need to know that not necessarily you have to feel formal complaint. You can also go and just talk to them and tell them that is going on with you. And as Judith said, they will tell you, you can talk with the psychologist or just listen to you and until you are ready to do something further. Okay, do you have one last question? No? Okay, so.
Julian has a question.
Yes. Please.
Thank you again for this event. I think this is great. So I would like to ask you, because we are talking about the present, but how do you see the future? Because I see, like, for example, cases like the kid of Javier, probably the next generation. I mean, you don't have to explain the kid of Javier that you have to be equal with women, right? Because they are already seeing this. And it's very good that we are doing this kind of thing, because we are seeing this, and probably when we were kids, we didn't see that. So the question is, do you think this is a matter of one generation or two, and then we are going to be done with this problem?
I hope so.
We can only hope.
But I don't know.
Could someone comment right now?
I want to end in a more positive note. I mean, it's hard. It's hard, right? You know, some rights you think that there's an arch that bends slowly, but but is sometimes more like a ratchet. You know, at least in the U.S., you know, some rights are being lost right now. You have to advocate for defending the rights that we have and claiming the ones that we should. And it's not so simple to think that it's gonna be solved. You know, like look at like minority rights in the U.S. have been, Black people have had oppression for centuries, and so it's hard. And I think you have to acknowledge that it's hard to try to make progress, because if you just close your eyes and think that things are going to be okay in 10 or 15 years, they're going to stay the same. And I think it's important to take the initiative and to those people that can, because it's not easy for everybody, and you can be in a vulnerable position that doesn't allow you to fight for those rights. And but if you have the privilege, then I think it's important to use it.
But if I can follow up on your question, I don't think this is going to get resolved in 1 or 2 generations. It's great that many of us serve by example, right? So that hopefully children, et cetera, are seeing a certain model and are going to say, well, this is the way it should be, an equal distribution of labor, et cetera. It's okay if this person or that person is working hard today, tomorrow the other one picks up. A lot of times that's not the example they have. And even if that is the example they have, they'll grow up and they could turn out to be very different from their parents. You never know, right? So I think what we need to remember are things like you don't want to just deal with this on your own and isolate yourself and become bitter and very unhappy, and therefore you end up dropping out of the system. And it's hard because it's hard to fight. It's hard to fight all the time. It can be exhausting. And so that's when having good role models, whether it was a woman that you now saw joining your department, a woman who is in a position of leadership, or an underrepresented scientist of any type who now has a position, that will elevate you. But you also need to seek out, and I think multiple people in the panel have said that you need to look for people who will fight with you or for you. You can't do it on your own. And so look for the loudest voice in the room. Look for people who will then get together as a community, like Pierre was saying, happened at Brandeis, right? You have to try to find strength by communicating with others. Don't keep it inside. And hopefully that will allow you to keep moving forward and it will make things better. Will it fully be resolved in 2 generations? I don't think so, but we need to keep trying, right?
Well, we run out of time. Thank you very much to all our panelists and thank you all of you for making your contributions and make this a very interesting and forum for us, and we can continue talking. You can approach us and ask if you want a piece of advice or something from us, you are welcome. Thanks a lot.